Try sharing your screen and make sure that works.
Is it visible to you, Vinny?
It is, yeah. It looks great. Yep, it's good.
Let me just make sure that I can kind of navigate it. Okay, yeah, I'm in, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and admit everyone, and then we usually give it like a minute or two, and then I will introduce you and turn it over to you.
Awesome.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our weekly Shanti in Place meditation and gathering. This week is a little atypical, but I'm so delighted about that because it means we get the great privilege and fortune and joy of hearing from one of my dearest friends and teachers, Angela Quinn. Angela is the owner and program director and main teacher and inspiration for Prana Yogashala, located in Princeton. And she also teaches yoga, asana, and philosophy at Princeton University. Angela and I have had the good fortune of co-facilitating different educational experiences, including the Yoga and Meditation Fellowship through the university. So we've been co-facilitators of this amazing experience, taking a group of Princeton University students to India for an immersive yoga experience. So today, Angela is going to be our facilitator. And so we're going to do things a little bit differently. And I will turn it over to her in just a moment to walk us through how we will be spending our time together. I also do want to let everyone know that, again, you might have heard me say this last week. We are trying something a little bit new. We are also live streaming on YouTube. So the session is being live streamed on YouTube. You're welcome to keep your cameras on or off as you feel comfortable. We do ask that you mute yourself out during the practice at least, but otherwise it's totally up to you. And please do drop me a note and let me know, if you'd like us to revisit this. But for now, we're experimenting with live streaming on YouTube. So with that, let me turn it over to my dear friend and teacher, Angela, who will take us on a journey into the mysteries of compassion. Angela?
So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Vineet ji. So I'm just humbled and honored that Vineet says that I'm a teacher of his. He's a profound teacher in my life. So I'm just humbled and honored to be here today, as always. Working in collaboration with Vineet and the Office of Religious Life. So I wanted to kind of talk about just compassion for a little bit. So I'm actually going to share my screen, so bear with me for just a moment. So this is a concept that's been arising for me in my meditations over the past few weeks. Of course, there's been a lot going on just in the world around us, and I can sometimes feel a bit powerless in regards to how I can care for others and how I can make the change and be the change that I want to see in the world around me. So as I reflect in meditation, I keep coming back to this point of compassion, this point of empathizing with the plight and the suffering of others, and how I can kind of mitigate those emotions within myself, and then be able to kind of share and transform that suffering into something more productive, into something that is a little bit lighter and will help to, again, bring relief to those that are suffering in the world around us. So I just wanted to go a little bit into just kind of the origins of compassion in spiritual practice. So in spiritual practice, there's two words that, again, these are words that are in Sanskrit, and karuna, which is the first word, also meaning compassion, is the same in Sanskrit as it is in Pali. And it's oftentimes used in the Buddhist practice to denote compassion. And then in Sanskrit, DAYA is the word for compassion. And to define both of those words, compassion, karuna, DAYA, is having sensitivity for the suffering of others and being compelled to take action in helping to alleviate the suffering of others and oneself. And I know that that can seem a little intense. It can seem like a burden to bear. But again, we're just taking our individual self, our individual practice, and being able to utilize that practice with directionality and purpose to help assist alleviating the suffering of others. And there's a specific practice in Tibetan Buddhism that is designed for this giving and receiving. So this receiving the suffering of others, and then through receiving the suffering of others, being able to send out relief and healing. And it's called Tonglen. We'll just take a look at this. So Tonglen, and Tonglen is literally translated as giving and receiving. And it's a Tibetan meditation practice that consists of breathing in the suffering of others and breathing out pure, clean, healing energy. So the aim of the practice is to reduce selfish attachment, to purify our karma by giving and helping, and to develop and expand our ability to be compassionate. Because compassion is like a muscle, right? Where we can exercise compassion and we can allow ourselves to feel deeper compassion. So this practice is going to, again, do all of those things. We're going to engage with that practice today. So as we kind of get ourselves situated, I just like us to find just a comfortable position. I like to sit down on the ground. I'm quite the yogi, so I find myself sitting on the ground pretty regularly, but wherever you're seated is perfectly fine. I'm just making sure that we, again, are comfortable and that we find ease in the seat. And as we find ourselves in an easeful seat, just allow ourselves to settle into ourselves. Maybe allowing the eyes to softly close. And allowing the awareness to shift from that engagement with the external world and settling it to the inner realm. So again, we're going to engage with this practice called Tonglen, or compassion meditation. Having sensitivity for the suffering of others, and being compelled to take action in helping to alleviate that suffering in others and ourselves. So let's invite a deep breath into our nostrils, allowing the breath to expand across our rib cage and our back body, allowing ourselves to become filled with the breath, filling us up to capacity. And then as we feel ourselves full to capacity, maybe allowing just a little more of an inhalation into our body, and pause. Now we'll part the lips and allow ourselves to exhale out through the mouth with a sigh. Let's do that one more time. So inhaling through the nostrils, allowing that breath to expand to the low abdomen, feeling that breath expand across the rib cage, the backside of the throat. And when we feel ourselves filled with the breath to our capacity, invite just a little more breath in and pause. At the time of our exhalation, allow our lips to part as we sigh it out through the mouth. Now allowing ourselves to settle into the natural syncopation of our breath, letting us remain aware that we are breathing in and we are breathing out, and that we are doing so together. We'll start this brief compassion meditation, Tonglen, meaning sending and receiving. In this practice, we will be consciously breathing in the suffering of others and breathing out relief from that suffering. Bringing into the mind's eye a friend or a loved one that we know is experiencing suffering. Envisioning that friend, envisioning that loved one. And then envisioning the suffering as a cloud lingering around that loved one. Moving our awareness to the heart area and breathing in deeply, imagining ourselves inhaling those heavy, uncomfortable, cloudy feelings into our hearts. Now, as we exhale, imagining we are breathing out pure, bright, nourishing air, as though our body is a plant receiving pollution and sending out clear, pure, healing energy. Allow ourselves to sit with this practice for a few moments, inhaling the suffering and exhaling the relief. Inhaling the cloud and exhaling that vibrant light of healing. Now, as we continue, begin to visualize the suffering beyond any individual person. You might expand your awareness to people who live in your building, your neighborhood, a city, a country, or even the world. Allow the size of the group to expand until we are breathing in the suffering from all directions and breathing out the healing and relief in all directions as well. Now, allowing ourselves to return to resting in open awareness. Following our inhalation all the way in and following our exhalation all the way out. Breathing in deeply together. Expanding our breath throughout our being and allowing ourselves to sigh it out through the mouth. One more time, breathing in deeply together, expanding that breath. And with our exhalation, allowing ourselves to liberate from any tension that we might have accumulated through that Tonglen practice. Relaxing, letting go, and observing. How that practice landed in our body, in our mind, and in our hearts. We can allow ourselves to slowly blink our eyes open, allowing ourselves to take in surroundings around us. I thank you so much, everyone, for sharing in that practice with me this afternoon, and to Vineet for allowing me to share Tonglen with all of you.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you all for practicing with us. We do want to hold some time. We're actually doing quite well with time, so we're going to hold some time for questions, comments, reflections, shares, whatever is on your mind or on your heart, either in relation to this practice or perhaps as an extension of last week's open Q&A and discussion.
Hi, this is Anne. I have something, it's more on my mind coming from my experience in my everyday life, not necessarily centered on any topic we're talking about right now. Is that cool, Vineet?
Absolutely, yeah. Angela, are you game?
And I guess I'd enjoy bringing this to this group because we're sensitive, because we're thinking about how we're putting ourselves out there and caring of others. So one thing that I've noticed since the murder of George Floyd is that I find myself in conversations with acquaintances or friends, and I sense some insensitivity on their part towards towards the racism that exists in this country, and how the horrible effects that it has on those who are oppressed, those who are people who are prejudiced against. And I have, in those moments, sensed myself feel very angry at my acquaintances or friends, so much so that I couldn't even engage in a healthy conversation. My emotion just went way up. So I guess one thing with one person in particular, I have had sort of more conversations where I'm trying to say, like, hey, you know, like, I'll point out things that they'll say. For example, the person actually made some criticisms of George Floyd's character. And I'm saying, well, do you notice how you said these things, these criticisms of George, but you haven't said criticisms as strong of the police officer who murdered him? And I would say these, and my friend was like, where are you trying to go? Where are you trying to go? And I was like, I want you to feel compassion for George Floyd. I don't want you to criticize him. And then the thought that I had after that, like, let's not kick him when he's down. You know, my friend was again criticizing George's character and saying he didn't understand why people were raising him up so high. The thought that I had later was, George did not ask to be the poster child of racism in the United States. You know, he wasn't preparing for this. He didn't apply for this role, and it's not a win for him. So those are things that are going on in my life, in my conversations. And I just wanted to sort of put them out there and see if anybody has anything to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. In some ways, I think what you're raising is also something that's on my mind and my heart, and something that I'm trying to hold in light of the practice that Angela shared with us today. And for me, it also gets into sort of extending, like, in this moment, extending compassion to those who perhaps raise some of these feelings within us of frustration, of anger, and I know, you know, it's a whole subject unto itself, but I think this also brings us to a place that we talked about last week a little bit, but also, like, what, if anything, is the role of forgiveness in this moment as well. And so, yeah, just to kind of echo some of the questions and kind of how fraught it is, and that you're raising. Angela, would you share some thoughts and insights with us?
Yes, of course. Yeah, so Anne, I think that a lot of us are navigating kind of similar fields in terms of, you know, communicating with others and people close to us, and it's noble work to kind of go into those conversations when we know there will be potential hesitation and resistance to that which we are sharing. I know that for me, my meditation practice has definitely lent its hand to me recognizing, akin to what Vinici was saying, that compassion is non-discriminatory, right? So although we do have compassion for George Floyd and the Black community, we also need to have compassion for those who are ignorant of kind of what that equality and justice looks like. And I know that can be really hard for us to tap into that space, right? But we have to understand that ignorance is actually coming from that person's suffering or that person's inability to kind of see things as they are. And again, we can't actually, we can't change that in others, right? We can be clear in ourselves, and we can model what that looks like, and only hope that at some point it sticks, or at some point they see that. But yeah, when we feel that anger rising up within ourselves, which I know that I've experienced through the past few weeks as well, also doing the work to trace that back where that's coming from within ourselves, and what we can work on within ourselves to, you know, because we don't want to react with anger to that person, because then it's just kind of creating this cycle of kind of fire and fire, right? So it's almost like that same energy that we want to dissipate, we're trying to kind of fight those feelings with that same energy. But if we can kind of respond from a place of just being really compassionate, and not come from a place where we're pitying the other person, but just that we recognize even parts of ourselves where we've fallen short, and knowing how we've grown and we've expanded, and also trusting in their capacity to grow and learn and expand as well. But it starts with us, you know. I know that from myself, like it starts with moving inside of ourselves and being able to kind of move into that space of being overwhelmingly compassionate, and then when we respond from that space of heartfelt compassion, this would also so when we, I'm sorry, I read Malta writing it. When we respond from this place of heartfelt compassion, we're modeling that behavior. We're modeling that behavior of going deep into those spaces within ourselves, tapping into compassion and forgiveness within ourselves, and modeling it to those that maybe haven't done that work quite yet, and showing them what it looks like in practice and in action. And it piques curiosity, if nothing else, you know. I think a lot of times people are just looking for us to be reactionary, as opposed to remaining equipoised and moving from that space of being equipoised in our practice.
If I can just add, I think something that came up, and Angela, you mentioned this beautifully today, where compassion in this paradigm of yoga philosophy, of meditation and mindfulness, is so deeply and intimately linked with the idea of empathy. And so the more we're kind of tapping into authentic compassion, which is quite different than, as Angela was saying, quite different than merely pitying the other, the more we're tapping into that, the more it requires us to cultivate real empathy. I sometimes think of the example of, as a parent especially, where if my daughter is like having a meltdown, right? And those of you who are parents, you might know what I mean by this little sutra, meltdown. It's like, it's its own phenomena if you've experienced it. So when she's having this meltdown, I can react to the meltdown itself, and often my manas, my reactive mind, my emotions, everything pulls me to react to the meltdown itself. To the extent that I'm able to take a step back and tap into empathy, it's not that the particulars of the meltdown or the things that she's saying or doing, if she's kicking and screaming, it's not like any of those things make sense or are justified. But what I'm able to do is I'm able to go, you know, a level or two beneath and beyond them, and try to tap into what is the feeling that these things are kind of the very unpleasant symptoms of. And that feeling, whether it's a need for care, for attention, feeling misunderstood, whatever it is, those feelings I can relate to, those feelings I can connect to, and if I'm honest with myself, then they're the same struggles that show up in my life. They just show up in different ways. And so I know it's incredibly difficult, but if we can even set the intention to tap into that place of empathy rather than reaction, I think it fundamentally changes. We still have to wrestle with it, but it changes the way that we wrestle with it. I too am distracted by Malta's excellent question in the chat box. So Malta's asking about the relationship between Tongling and metta or maitri meditation, which some of us have engaged in before. So I actually had the same question, and I'm less familiar with Tonglen. So Angela, can you shed some light?
Yeah, and I mean, this also speaks to what I had kind of said to Anne in regards to her question, that really the practices, yes, they do start with us, and they start within us, and that gives us the lens to be able to kind of extend those practices outward. So absolutely, self-compassion is a number one in terms of the practice. All of those practices of mindfulness and meditation are meant to really work from our practice and then extend outward. So definitely agree with you, Malta, that being firm and compassion to ourselves is really important for us to to extend that outward. And I think even akin to what Vinici was saying, right? Like when we reflect inside of ourselves and when we see our own shortcomings, or when we see those undesirable kind of feelings and emotions rising up, just recognizing where they come from within ourselves, because our human experience, although it's a unique experience, there's also these shared human experiences that we all have. We all have felt anger. We all have felt frustration. We all have felt jealousy. So again, recognizing and not judging those feelings within ourselves, but recognizing where they come from, and also recognizing how we've been able to transcend those emotions are so important for us to do, again, in that work of extending outward, because it really does start with us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your thoughts. Yeah, I could definitely see how, hey, that compassion that I might be having for George, I could have that compassion for my friend who I'm talking to. And I probably was really poking him, sort of like, no, what you're saying is wrong, and I want you to feel differently. In this moment, I'm alternatively thinking I could have said, really, well, this is the way I look at it. Or I could have just sat with it and said nothing. I think what I'm trying to navigate is maybe in the past, if somebody said something that I didn't feel comfortable with, I might have just said nothing because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And now I'm going over into, I'm going to say something, but I might be hurting their feelings. And so I guess my path is maybe trying to find a way to say something without attacking the person for what they're saying, because I want to go for community and kindness towards others. And I guess in the process of getting there, my challenge will be to do that in the process, not just setting that as a goal.
Yeah, and Anne, if I can add to that too. So this practice of Tonglen that we practiced, we did like a 15-minute practice, but this can be a practice that you practice in the moment with a person, so you can actually be breathing in their suffering and breathing out that light and that healing to them. So you can actually just give yourself pause in that interaction with others to allow yourself to, again, kind of tap into those feelings of kind of breathing in their suffering and breathing out that pure, clean, healing energy towards them. And I think that will transform those relationships, because again, those relationships are meaningful, and you don't want to lose those relationships because of disagreement. You want to be able to kind of see where each other are at, and also just kind of, and navigate it from that perspective of equality, which we're actually looking to. That's really what we're looking for, generally speaking.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, friends, we've arrived at the end of our time together. Thank you again, Angela. This was so beautiful. I hope we can have you back sometime soon. And thank you, everyone, for joining in our practice and for forging community together. The more I reflect on these beautiful, deep teachings around compassion, around loving kindness, around forbearance and gratitude, the more I realize that while they're kind of daunting to think about cultivating on my own, there's something really exciting and inviting about being able to cultivate them in community and cultivate them together. So thank you for being such a wonderful, honest, vulnerable community together. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful rest of your week, and hope to see you back next week, if not sooner. Take care. Stay safe.